Hello and welcome to Megan's Mystical Mashup, a conversation between me and a guest about life, the universe, and anything in between. I'm Megan Rounds and welcome to today's show. Today's guest was homeschooled until her sophomore year of high school. Those remaining high school years were enough for her to meet her future husband, Evan, who she's been together with for 14 years and married to for 7. Originally from Eastern Washington State, her and Evan now live in Orange County, California, with their two fur babies, a lab Aussie mix named Bodie, who has one blue eye and one brown, and a mini Dachshund who is lovingly called Wiener, but whose real name is Lily. She's only called Lily when she's in trouble, though. The rest of the time, she's Wiener. Now, do you understand the connection to the good news story? She's been a member of the Lightworkers Lab for a little over 2 years, and you can find her in the lab Lightroom, as well as here in the main lab, where she hosts Heart Light with Kelsey Kinsey White every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. She's also recently become a moderator. Congratulations! She's an intuitive channel and is self-employed as a spiritual teacher and soul coach. She's incredibly crafty and loves to create. In addition to providing readings and coaching with some on-demand classes and courses in the works for next year, she also has an Etsy shop where she sold out of her handcrafted metaphysical tool, the Inner Source Illuminator. Hopefully she plans to restock those as they look amazing, and I can feel the energy flowing from them even just looking at the pictures. They're really cool. She's also planning to create more products, so I highly encourage you to check her shop out. And I will post her information in just a moment. Please give a warm Lightworkers welcome to Kelsey Kinsey White. And, oh no. I'm not seeing you here, Kelsey. I'm not even seeing my ability to add you at this point. There? Okay, let's try it this way. There are a lot of different ways to invite people onto the live program. Thank goodness. Let's see if it works. And I'm going to pause this if I can. Well, just gonna send a quick note to Kelsey to see if she's here. Okay, so pardon the delay, but sometimes technology has its own agenda. I'm communicating with Kelsey via Messenger because it tends to be a little bit faster, and I'm curious. It looks like we have, I'm not, if you're here, can you just send a comment or a heart or a smiley face if you don't want to say anything? I haven't seen any comments go through, and so I'm wondering if, I can see the video, or the live on my desktop, so I'm, okay, yeah, it's not showing up for me. Huh. There we go, let's try it again. Huh, it's interesting. I wonder, hi.
Hi.
I'm just going to see, I'm not seeing any comments at all. So it's really interesting because usually I see a bunch of comments from people. But I see them on my laptop. So let's just go with that. Okay. Let's take a break. Okay. Welcome, Kelsey. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Good. I'm glad this worked. Okay. Woohoo.
Yay. We did it.
Yes. So were you able to check out the pictures of that Dachshund?
I did. While you were talking, I checked out that link, and he's so cute.
He sure is. I know, those are really cool pictures. And I thought, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, in all of them, he's like looking up at what he's bouncing, like he's so proud.
Yeah, I noticed that too. His eyes are always up like this. And at first I thought it was like photoshopped or something else, but it sounds like that's just the way he is, which is super cool. Very good. Well, so how are you this bright and early Saturday morning?
I'm well. We're having some weird weather changes too, so I'm kind of, I feel a little kind of coughy and sinusy, so I'm I feel you.
Well, you'll fit right into this household,
Yeah.
that's for sure. Well, as I mentioned before, I think I mentioned before, this is your first time here on the Mashup, and I'm really thrilled to have you here.
Yeah.
And with first-time guests, typically I start out with the big old question of what's your spiritual journey been? How did you, and incorporate into that how you got to the lab, how you found the lab?
Yeah, absolutely. Where do I begin?
And I should say, this doesn't have to be linear, so it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
at the beginning. It can be wherever you want, and if you want to circle and move around, that's totally fine.
All right, yeah. Well, I grew up in organized religion. I had quite a sheltered childhood, I would say, homeschooling as well. I mean, my parents homeschooled for religious reasons, really.
Okay.
And so it was like Christian-based curriculum and everything. I grew up in church. My parents both ran ministry.
Wow.
So, I mean, we were there like 4 days a week, like it was my home.
Yeah.
And I always had a spiritual connection. I even remember as a small child not really connecting to the church, and just little things of like, is that really what that means? And I don't know about that. So I was always kind of questioning and never felt super connected to the faith itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But also experienced so much growth from it too. But I always had my own personal connection to God or a higher power or something of that nature. So I consider myself, I think I've always been spiritual or spiritually connected or aware of my connection. But I would say it was probably when I went away to college, that I can't even say rebellion. It was like a mini rebellion internally, That was my first real experience kind of out in the world, out like away from my family, away from my parents, and really on my own. And so I went through some questioning, I guess you would say, just really kind of rejecting sort of the idea of God that I grew up with, and wondering, what is God? What is the universe? What does it mean to be human? What does it all mean? This sort of existential kind of crises questions that I think we all go through at some point in our life.
Totally.
I would say I kind of hopped on the science train a little bit, where I was into this idea of energy and everything being energy. And so it's interesting because I was kind of, again, rejecting this idea of God, but also still very connected to some idea of a higher power. So I was, into quantum physics and multidimensionality, and kind of exploring that, on the side on my own. But still all the while praying every day, like always, like, what am I praying to? It doesn't really matter. It feels good,
Yeah.
and it feels right. And so I never really abandoned the things that felt sacred to me, but was just trying to reorganize everything for myself in a way that made sense. And so that probably was my college and early 20s, was kind of that questioning period of not really sure where I fit, deciding that I wasn't the kind of Christian that I was raised in, not really sure if I even wanted to label myself, into the science and energy and interdimensional parallel realities and reincarnation. That sounds like it makes sense to me. If energy doesn't die, it's just translated and reformed. And it was gosh, I don't know now. It was probably just like 3 or so years ago. Space still fascinates me, and space was kind of a portal of this idea of what's out there in the unknown and dimensional whatever. And so I'm fairly certain that I was researching aliens or just ETs, and the idea that they were interdimensional beings, this idea that there was a multiverse and parallel realities, and that, our searching in the known world wasn't really yielding results because it wasn't about the physical, it was about what's beyond the veil, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm fairly certain that's how I found Crystal Ann Compton. I was looking today and I can't I don't remember what the exact video was, but I'm pretty sure I landed on some kind of video about interdimensionality or interdimensional beings on YouTube. And that's how I found Crystal. And that was that was the first time I'd heard the word like metaphysical, like, and had it like land or hit. Like, I don't know if I've ever, I'm sure the word was out there, but I don't consciously remember ever coming in contact with it. And so then that was like this whole, rabbit hole of like metaphysics. What is this? And it kind of blended the idea of a higher power and, like a synchronistic, meaningful universe with also all this potentiality and energy. And I was just like blown open because I'd never even had these concepts before, Sure. So that was the rabbit hole, and that was like the portal, I guess.
That's super cool.
So I kind of consider that my sort of metaphysical awakening, because I've always felt spiritually connected to something in some way, shape, or form.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. And so I think Crystal at the time had a podcast. So I watched some of her videos. I remember videos on connecting to angels, which that resonated with me, coming from Christianity, which we don't really talk a whole lot about angels and connecting with them, but they're a concept, they're a being. And on her podcast at the time, she kept talking about this exclusive Facebook group that she had for her students, that had taken her classes that she was considering opening up to the general public. And so I was like checking Facebook every damn day, like, come on, lady. And I think in the beginning they opened it up for like a monthly paid fee or something. I didn't join until she actually opened it up for free to the general public, and it was just perfect timing. My husband and I just moved to California, and it was like a month later that the lab opened up and I joined. So that's where all my like exponential growth has occurred, is here in the lab community, with all of the resources here. And so it just like perfectly coincided with my move to California, which was, I'd lived elsewhere before, but I was back at home in the hometown that I grew up in with my family. And it was just like the perfect kind of separation to really launch into the freedom of exploring this new sort of lifestyle, without family kind of hanging over my head or the worry of judgment that we all really deal with, and so it was just perfect timing, and I've just been riding that roller coaster ever since.
Well, that's amazing. And I love it. I love hearing your story, and that the distinction between metaphysical and spiritual is when I include both when I talk about things a lot of the time, because some people come in with a spiritual journey, but not having yet identified any metaphysical aspect. Some maybe never do. But to me, those are really, well, at least from my experiences, the same type of thing where I've always been spiritual, but I haven't always been metaphysical, although there's always been a thread for me that's been like, like you with the quantum physics and energy and all those things, I found totally fascinating. And so I love hearing how people do or don't distinguish those two. So I really appreciate your bringing that forward. I'm super curious about how your family, like your parents and that community have received, if they have,
that's a good conversation. And one I would love to share. So I think it was sometime last year that I kind of came out of the spiritual closet, if you will, as we say, to my parents. And I want to say it was probably about a year ago. I was probably I've taken a lot of Crystal's classes and a lot of the programs in the lab. And so I don't know, I just reached a point where I felt like this is so much a part of what I'm interested in and who I am and how I live on a daily basis. I don't want to hide that, and I don't want to curb that at all. I don't want to have to keep that part of myself. I want to be my whole self, especially with mom and dad, because I love them dearly and I know they love me. And so it wasn't a huge conversation. I'm not even exactly sure what I said, but basically I don't know, we FaceTimed and I was like, I just want to let you know that I'm going through some things and some changes in my belief systems, and I just want you to know it's all love based. It's all about love. I'm still connected to Creator. I tried to use languaging and words that would make sense to them.
Yeah.
Because my parents, as Christians, are kind of what I would call model Christians. They're very love-based, and they have their own personal communion practice. They wouldn't call it meditating, but they each separately and together each morning read their scripture, have their prayer time. So it's very much a personal relationship versus just, kind of an organizational idea that's fed to them.
Yeah.
So they still participate in church and they still participate in community, but I would say they have a very personal spiritual relationship with God or Creator, whatever they would call it. And I've always valued that in them because, I think so much of us are searching, and so we're searching outside.
Yep.
And, we're being fed information versus really seeking it for ourselves. And I think they found a balance where they can participate in community, but also have their own practice.
Yeah.
And so, I basically just told them that some things were shifting for me. Everything was love-based, but I wasn't really sure where I fell. I didn't think that my belief systems fully aligned with that, with what I grew up with, And they asked a few questions, but it was kind of brief. We didn't really go into all the details. But they were open. They praised that love was the main, the main energy or the main idea. And it's kind of just blossomed since. So we talk about it a little here and there every time we communicate and every time they visit. I told them it was only them that it was only important for me to really communicate that to them. I wasn't really worried about the rest of the family. I figured that could happen organically. And I know my father's side of the family would totally freak out. So I'm kind of just waiting for that to happen.
Sure.
But I think I'm prepared for it now. But they would definitely be worried for my soul or something like that,
Yeah. There are other people that I've had on the show who have had those types of experiences too. Some more recent have had it. It was like all of a sudden it's out of the bag, and but it's divine timing most likely. And it's like
I agree.
I think it comes when you're prepared for it.
When you're ready.
They may not be. Yeah.
Yeah, they probably aren't. But it comes when you're ready. So that'll be interesting if and when that occurs. We're not super tight, so we don't communicate all the time. But I'm being more open, and all my stuff's on social media, so I'm just waiting for the day that someone sees something and is like, what is this? So it's pretty much just mom and dad that are fully aware. And again, every time that we communicate, more comes up. And actually the last time they were visiting me, which was just a few weeks ago, it's so fun every time they come to visit, because we actually get to have day-long conversations, because we actually, my parents and I, we don't communicate super often. It's when we do, it's like an hour-long conversation because we haven't talked in a month or two. But when they come to visit, it's always so much fun, and we just enjoy hanging out and visiting and spending time with each other. And so it's just couch time and coffee and deep chit chat, I guess.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And the more I open up, the more they open up. It's insane, because my childhood was so, at least my remembrance and my perception of my childhood is like night and day compared to the life I live now. And even the life they live and how open they are. And I think part of that just is being parents. They really wanted a strong foundation. And so, things were really tight and kind of, in my opinion, pretty strict and sheltered. But I think in the end, I think that served me just fine. And really them just opening up started when I entered high school and, into the world. And then it's just grown since then. But spiritually speaking, the last time they were here, and just again, every time we talk, we kind of open up and go even deeper. And it's just so fascinating how we're speaking the same freaking language it's just different words. They're speaking Christianese and I'm speaking something else, you know? And in the beginning, I'd say in the beginning, I could see that. I remember in the beginning they were a little resistant, but it's just the more we talk about it, the more they open up and the more I see them going like, yeah, and they're seeing that I'm speaking their language, just using different semantics and different words. And, you know, just, yeah, it's awesome. It's so cool. And this time around, we were talking about astrology and mediumship.
Wow.
I'm like, who are these people? These are my parents, you know? So I've been really blessed that they've been so open and receptive and willing to listen and willing to explore.
Yeah.
And not be fearful, you know? So it's been really awesome. I mean, I can't even believe the idea of mediumship came up. My mom was like, well, Jesus was calling, I can't even remember who it is right now, somebody back into his body. Like he was speaking to his spirit, not his physical form. He was telling his spirit to come, Lazarus,
yes,
to come back into his body.
Yeah,
like that
I think. I'm no
I'm pretty
expert.
sure it was Lazarus. And I'm like, yeah, Mom, you're right. Like, this is trippy. I can't believe you're saying these words, you know? So it's been really cool. And they did, oh God, is it like theosophy or theology? They went to Bible school is what they called it. And so it's either, I think it's a theosophy or theology degree. They did it. It was a program that was run through our church at the time. I was probably like 10 or 11. And so they went to Bible school for a whole week every month for like 8 months. So they have like an AA in theosophy or theology or something. It was
Sure.
like a church-run program. But it seems like my mom was talking about that this last visit, and she was saying, actually saying, you know, I wish that we had kind of opened up about more of this with you when you were younger and kind of shared this side of our religion and this side of our faith. And because it's actually, when she was telling me about it and their ideas and how we were kind of speaking the same language, it was all related to what they learned in Bible school, because it was kind of had this esoteric edge. And so I was fascinated. So I was asking them questions about, you know, what they learned there and what they thought about this. And we were just, you know, bouncing all of these things back and forth. And yeah, she did share a kind of regret that we didn't share more of that side of it. And I was like, oh, Mom, let that go, because I probably would have rejected it. I probably wasn't ready for it. So I got to find it all in my own time. And now we get to have this kind of experience together. So there is, like, the more I open up and share, the more they open up and kind of remember and bring forward some of that more esoteric kind of information that I didn't even know they were into or that they had education in. Yeah. So it's been really fascinating. I feel really lucky and blessed that's been my experience, because I know that is not everyone's.
Well, and what I it just popped into my head is this kind of transformation from, you know, being a child and seeing your parents one way to being an adult and getting to know them differently. Yes. I think that's such a beautiful thing when it can happen. And it doesn't always happen for some people, and some people it takes a long time, and it may only be with one parent instead of both. Yeah. But I found the same to be true with my experiences. As a younger adult, my parents still had younger kids, like 10 and 8 years younger than me. So I think they were still very much in parent mode. And so I don't think they opened up all that much when I was in my 20s. But then later, we did get to start to talk to each other on a different level. Yeah. And I've really appreciated that. And especially with my mom, who has opened up about some of her more metaphysical experiences, that she's a Taurus, she's Earth, you know, and she's not, what did I say? Taurus? No, actually she's an Aries, but she's very, I need proof. Yeah. But yet she said, I've talked to angels. You know, and I believe there is a presence around me and things like that, which is really fascinating and exciting to hear her experience. Yeah. My dad, who is also an Aries, does not talk about those things, although I do believe, first of all, I believe he's an empath, but there's absolutely no way he would. Right. But he did grow a ponytail, you know, and that was not the dad I grew up with. So. And he once told my mom he thought he would be a really good, like he really aligns with Zen. Like he doesn't say Buddhism, he says Zen, but you know, he does have this, he like walks around and picks up garbage around the roads near their house. And he's got a very peaceful nature most of the time. And that is something that I never would have even been able to see if it was there when I was a kid growing up. And I was the oldest, so, you know, I just always saw rules and strictness. Because that's the way they, you know, they wanted to parent that way. And it was important to have rules and boundaries and things. I get that. I'm curious, are you an only child or do you have siblings as well?
No, I have one younger brother.
Okay.
Yeah, he just had a baby. He just had the first grandbaby.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a lot of my work has been with our relationship.
Okay. Well, there's always somebody.
Yes, there's always someone. There's always something. Yeah.
And if that's the only one you have to work on, then that's fabulous.
That's the main one, I would say. Yeah.
I think I have a deck of cards, and you know, maybe not quite a very small deck, but still definitely more than one. That's, you know, and so I had some questions written down and now I've forgotten them in part because I am distracted by that phrenology poster, and I think that's what it is behind you, right?
It is. It's a phrenology poster.
I love that poster, and I've seen it, and I almost picked it up along with some others to make kind of a mashup, but they're all the same color kind of, so I'm like, I don't know if anyone would even notice it, but I love that poster, so I had to point it out because it's just so cool.
Yeah, I got that, I don't know, probably back in college. That's what I studied or not phrenology, but psychology.
Say, cool.
I think phrenology is dead.
You know, it maybe, but I'm seeing more and more just little here and there studies around things that I can't really articulate it very well. Kind of an unspecified link between maybe the more esoteric and the quantum aspects of things, more energy related things that we can't see, hear, smell, touch, or taste, and the brain. Aspects of the brain and how we perceive things, aspects of the brain and how it drives us in behavior. But there was one, I didn't actually click on it, but it's in the Good News Network, something about deep brain and happiness or something. Yeah. And so it's like it seems like some things are starting to be connected in ways. Well, and certainly experiments that were done a long time ago around psychedelics, and now that's coming back in a much more scientific way. And so I see this opening up. It maybe hasn't really happened yet, but to where a lot more people are becoming more receptive and open to the potential that there's more out there than what our five senses tell us. Yeah,
absolutely. Yes, to consciousness and the field, and the brain being the filter of those things.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and heart math, you know, and how the brain isn't necessarily the most important organ in our body, which they used to kind of say.
That's like my main message is the heart brain, you know, and the heart brain coherence. Yeah. Yes. The brain being that sort of executive assistance organizer of the feeling state of the heart. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that is a really important thing for societally speaking. I'm having such a hard time talking. It's a really important thing that I think is necessary in order, like our ability to attune more closely to our emotions, to allow emotions into our lives in ways where many of us in this society and many societies have been conditioned not to accept them, to close ourselves off to them. And because of that, it's really hard when we feel emotions. We just want to say, never mind. I want to, cope by doing these other things. Yep. Run away. Yeah. Either close off or run away. And maybe there's some other reactions, but those are the two I've really seen a lot of.
I agree that kind of emotional well-being and learning how to navigate and cope and allow. That's definitely something I agree in society is very much changing. And we're opening up to that. And that's just going to open us up again, like you said, to all the else of what's out there and how we're navigating our own energy and all of that.
Yeah, and emotions are one of those things that we can feel them, but not in the way that they, talk about, like, oh, what's the word? I just missed it.
Like
What's
five
it called?
senses feel?
Yeah,
Or what do you...
kinesthetically, I think is
Oh,
the.
uh-huh.
But when they talk about originally feelings, I don't think they meant, love.
Right.
It's like, oh, it's here. I can touch it. I know it's here. But
Right.
emotions are more abstract and they're invisible, and we don't exactly, maybe you do, but we don't exactly know how they're formed. And I say that the scientific explanations when they talk chemicals is
Right.
one aspect, but not the only aspect. And
I
I
think,
keep
yeah,
thinking,
that's just the translation of the non-physical into physicality, is the
yeah,
hormones and stuff.
and I keep thinking that what is necessary is a new way to measure things that aren't based in the physical 3D realm. Because when people say, oh, that isn't real, it's like, well, it's not real, maybe based on the 3D instruments we use for measurement.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it isn't there. It just means we haven't come up with ways to
To quantify
identify
it, yeah.
it. Yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think too, just talking about this idea of emotions and everything being translated into physical via like chemicals and hormones. I just want to say that, like, our idea of consciousness, we tend to associate that with the realm of the mind and the brain, but like our entire system, we are a system of consciousness. And so the physical body, the heart, the mind, those are all the tools of the physical, embodiment that actually organize the consciousness into a way that we can feel it and perceive it and make sense of it. It's not just about our mind. The heart is conscious, the body is conscious, and so it's translating that consciousness into a visceral experience that we can then know what to do with. And so we're just learning, as a society, as a human race, how to not how to translate it because it's already being translated, but how to, I guess
Interpret.
interpret it. There you go. How to interpret that and how to navigate our life and ourselves through that communication of the consciousness through the vehicle of the body.
Well, and I think that, and yes, and that you bring that forward is like, okay, so yes, many of us have been taught to rely on our brains, on our heads.
Right.
Is it logical? Does it make sense? And all of those, and sense in a very physical way. And then there's the heart, and there's the gut. And, some say intuition comes through the gut. Other people, for me, I always I feel it in my neck. I don't know why that is exactly. Maybe it's because I've been disconnected for many years from my whole body, because I've either really just focused on expanding my brain and knowledge, and not allowing those physical sensations at a higher and more whole level to come in. And allowing those emotions in, and allowing a deeper connection to my body so that I can recognize what it's trying to tell me, because I've ignored it for a long time. And it's kind of like, sitting here listening to what my body has to say. Sometimes it doesn't feel like speaking, because it's like, why should I bother?
Yeah. It's like unlearning the mechanism of, like not listening or it not trying to communicate.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go down a little thread. You and I talked earlier about how I went to parent-teacher conferences, and this time at my daughter's new school, they do it arena style, which is a whole field house filled with all of the teachers for a 7th through 12th grade school, and then all the parents who are there to see them. And you have 5 minutes to talk to each teacher. They have some chairs. You can just wait. There's no appointments. I really had a hard time visualizing I visualized it actually pretty accurately. But what I noticed is I think I naturally close off. I knew I was going in there, and I knew that there was a potential for being overwhelmed. So I didn't have my connections open, let's say. I wasn't very receptive to all of the energy around me. But what I noticed is I didn't even have to think about it, and I think I closed off to the point from all of that extra activity. And I've come to recognize or believe through the years that I've developed this natural mechanism for closing off. That is the thing I have to learn how to open up and be more intentional about. It really bothered my husband who I think is really sensitive, but he has walls and barriers, but I think the sound really distracted him. And just the proximity with all of these different people in this big open space. And I found I was able to focus. And I'm wondering, maybe it was because I do more meditation, I do more deep breathing, I'm able to stay centered a little bit, well, maybe longer. And so it didn't distract me. And then it kind of bothered me that it didn't distract me, because I'm like, why wasn't I bothered by that? There were a lot of people there. You know, it was noisy. I could hear hums and just activity. But I was able to talk to the teachers and have conversations. And my husband was kind of like, I don't know what's happening. Get me out of this place. Yeah. Just thought it was really fascinating, because I was kind of geared for, I wasn't setting the intention though, but I was ready to be like, I've got to get out of here. And it really just didn't happen that way, which just really surprised me. Yeah. Anyway, I had to add that, because it was like, sometimes being closed off can be an advantage, I suppose, or maybe it was just a different way of being in large groups in a noisy place.
Well, do you think you were really closed off, or do you just think you were in a smooth operating control of your own energy, you know? Is it really shut down, or is it just in you know,
I think I called it closed. Yeah. Good. Oh, yes, I'm writing that down. I think, when I say closed down, I think it's that I have such strong protective, I don't want to call them bubbles, but maybe it was. I allowed in a connection with each teacher. I made a lot of eye contact with them. I leaned in mainly so I could hear, but also, just to be able to only focus on them. And I think that did really help. And so maybe it was something different than being closed off. I think when I know I'm going to some place, sometime, a part of me that's popping into my head is I allowed myself to be extroverted, which is like, sometimes I am, and, I'm kind of classified as an introvert, but I'm only like 1 point in the Myers-Briggs scale of being away from an extrovert. But I've been at home working independently for so long that I kind of thought I moved more towards the introverted range. But I allowed myself to get energy from other people. So not in a vampire way, but I did feel more energized there than I had coming into the thing. Yeah. And so maybe it really is just a different way to be that I hadn't thought about. Yeah,
a different way of running the energy.
Yeah, which is cool. I'm going to want to hone in on that now, because I love thinking about how to break down these types of experiences with energy and how we work with them and live with it, and utilize it to benefit us, but not in a manipulative way. How do we work with it? And really breaking that down and saying, okay, well, here's something I tried, and do some experiments. This wasn't an experiment, though. This was more like I wasn't feeling that great going into it. I wanted to be able to make it through and talk to all the teachers.
And then you were pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I felt a lot better afterwards, actually. And maybe it was also the group of people were pretty positive, I think. Everybody we talked to was positive. And
I would say it probably did help that it was, all the parents gathering to support their children and be informed, so it probably was a pretty positive environment too.
Yeah. And I think the teachers definitely got energy from this, environment. I had said to one teacher, I'm like, hey, you must be really burned out after a day of this. And then I'm like, oh, that's right. You teach junior high to 7th graders, and he's like, yeah, he's like, I'm feeling great.
He's like, adult conversation.
Yeah. These are also teachers who love teaching junior high, which is something that, you may not, it sounds like you didn't have a junior high experience.
I did not. I'm kind of grateful.
You are so fortunate. But I have to say, junior high is different now than it used to be. At least at this school, where they want to inspire kids. Because I'm like, I don't remember any of my junior high teachers smiling ever, or, never cracked a joke. We did, but, maybe at their expense. But it wasn't really a happy place.
Yeah. My poor brother, when I started my sophomore year, was my first year in public school.
My second least favorite lifetime of.
Yeah, right. As soon as I left, my mom was kind of like, well, maybe I should just shove this one out of the nest too and have him go to school. So he unfortunately started in middle school, junior high, and it was like the worst year of his life, that poor guy.
That's hard. That's rough.
Yeah.
All, what I heard in these teachers is that at this school at least, they're focusing on what it means to be a seventh grader and what it means to, they're asking them reflective questions about themselves.
Wow.
And like my daughter had an exercise about coming up with examples of win-win, win-lose, and lose-win. And I mean, for her, it was like, I don't know what this is. And I'm like, oh yeah, you do. Let's say we're going to the store to get an ice cream and I get what I want, but you don't, Did we both win? No. But the fact that they're even asking those questions, I mean, nobody cared. They did not care at all about who we were when I was in school in that grade. But yeah, they're all about helping kids to be organized, to recognize their strengths and
so cool.
who they are as individuals. Yeah, it's a really neat thing. So I think that's changing too. And they are incorporating some aspects that I would say, like mindfulness practices. They recognize the benefit and value, including breathing. Which my daughter rolls her eyes at when I suggest it, but when anyone else does, she's on it.
Yeah, I have a friend back home in Eastern Washington who is she's like a clinical family therapist, but she's doing all these amazing things in schools with mindfulness and meditation, teaching meditation, doing like parent-kid meditation workshops, and partnering with some of the schools to offer them during or after school programs and stuff. And her whole game is about emotional intelligence and emotional well-being, and it's okay to feel, and this is what we do when we're having feelings. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is crazy.
It's a great time.
I love that. And that reminds me of one of the news stories that you shared just about the yoga.
Downward dog. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing that story a little bit ago somewhere online out in the internet streets, and I was just like, oh my God, that touches my heart. That is so cool, because it's true that like she was saying, that yoga teacher had taught veterans, but it's like, how do we address this for the active duty people that are out there in the game that need this kind of support and maintenance and you know what I mean, and
real
I see that,
time.
Yeah, real time. And so that's kind of with the children and the way school is changing, the way you're describing this is like we're implementing more of that now.
Yes.
Real time where it's needed, so that it's not such a pick up the pieces later situation,
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that, my generation, and I'm at the top end of that generation, but I'm Gen X, but I'm like, right. Right there. But I identify as Gen X too. I'm way more that type than a baby boomer. I'm still not that. But we had to go through things, that weren't available to us. But I'm happy that now today's kids can benefit from that, and that there are people out in the field who are now benefiting from that. The things that were learned, the things that are embraced now that nobody ever wanted. I mean, there was I never heard of yoga when I was a kid. I grew up in a relatively small town, but I heard of dance, of course, things like that, but not yoga. That was not introduced until well into my 20s or 30s. And it's the fact that it's really becoming like a household name. Not everybody practices it, but most people know what it is.
Right.
And the breathing and things like that associated with it, I think are it's really nice to have that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you about your creative side, your things, because I took a look at your Etsy site, and I even though you don't have your cool light illuminator, but there were pictures there that people had posted in their reviews, and those are super cool.
Yeah, I love them. I have one right here actually.
Oh, good.
But
those are really neat.
I've been crafty forever. I mean, I think part of that was being homeschooled. Had to do a lot of self-entertaining, I suppose. We didn't really have a social life. So, I mean, I knit. I love to sew.
Wow.
I don't know. I just like to be creative with my hands. I like to paint, but that's just like for fun. I mean, all of it's just really for fun. So I just kind of I don't know, recently, well, actually, this came to me in meditation. This is, the Metatron cube. And this is how I see part of the human energy field, is I see like what I would call an aura, like an energy field, basically. But within the field, I see lines of like golden threaded kind of coating that makes up this Merkaba shape. And the coating, the way it's been explained to me is like the field, the vibratory field is like the vibratory sort of essence or signature of you as a being, of like your soul essence, whatever you want to call that. Your signature, I guess, as an energetic being. And then the grid is like the coded, it's almost like the blueprint. It's like the blueprint coded information of the specific intentions of you for this lifetime.
Oh.
So kind of like the blueprint. And so anyways, I received it in meditation. It was like, I'm going to make that and have that be like a tool that I like use, just like any crystal or any
Sure.
tool we partner with to, to build a relationship and connection with. So I made my own and was just using it in meditation with me. And then I was
Is
like,
it
why don't I
wire?
make these? What's that?
Is it all wire aside from the crystal?
It's
Or
copper
what?
rod.
Okay.
It's soldered together,
Oh,
copper
very
rod,
cool.
and then the wire is kind of just decorative and then to hold the crystal in place.
Okay.
And I picked a Lemurian because that was my first crystal that I ever purchased. And the history or the story behind Lemurian seed crystals is that they're from Lemuria or an ancient time, but they have the ridges on them. They have like lateral striations.
Oh.
And I want to say that they're not entirely sure why the crystals form with the lateral striations. And so the sort of mystical concept behind that is that they're record keepers, that they're coded with information, which we know crystals are. Like they're utilized in everyday technology to conduct energy, and transfer information. And so the idea of the Lemurian is that they're coded with ancient wisdom kind of thing. And so I picked the Lemurian, and that's kind of like the heart light or, the God seed or whatever you want to call it within the animating the energy field, the spirit, I don't know.
Well,
so
oh, go ahead.
I was just say, so I decided to make them and sell them as a meditation tool or a router. I have one that I bring into meditation with me or bring into channeled writing sessions with me if I want to feel like I have a partner or support. But then I have a couple that just sit on my altar that just like charge my room, route my room.
So they have specific purposes though, so you don't use the same one for both?
I've used them interchangeably. And I would say when I'm not using them actively in my meditation or in a practice, they're just sitting around holding that charge anyway, routing anyway.
Wow. I love that it came to you in meditation.
Yeah.
And that
me
you
too.
put it to form.
It took me a year to think about how do I actually make this thing? Like, what do I make it? Like, I had to learn how to solder. I'd never done that before.
Yeah, but now you can use it for all kinds of things, I would think.
Yeah, I want to make one of those big person-sized pyramids to meditate under. That's my next
what a cool idea.
thought for myself is, and that would be, I would need some heavy duty equipment, I think, for that. I'd need a bigger I'd need like a blowtorch.
A welder.
So yeah. So that's kind of my next on the back burner project that I want to try and play with. But I just yesterday got a whole bunch more of supplies, so I'm going to make my next batch of these for Etsy.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really neat. Well, so how do you think creativity has, I mean, it sounds like you've always just had this interest in your craftiness and things like that. Has it inspired you in any way well, certainly that way it did. Do you use it as a part of your spiritual metaphysical practice?
Yeah. I would say my craftiness is just part of that kind of, what do we call it? Like the bliss principle or the bliss discipline. Sometimes when I get really, I don't know, focused, hyper-focused, like which lately the topic that or the area of life where I would become hyper-focused and sort of to my detriment would be business stuff, building a business. remembering
ya.
to take time out and to just go do something fun that doesn't have any attachment, you know, like let's just spread some paint on a canvas because it feels good, you know,
Yeah.
or I've knitted so many things and then just ripped them out and started over because I didn't really need like that scarf, but it was just a present experience of creating something. And then I didn't even end up using it, but I just ripped out the yarn and did something different, you know, the next time around. But just to be in my body and to be creating something tangible and experimenting. And I very rarely follow patterns. Like when I sew or when I knit, I create my own. And so I'll use things that I've made before or use, you know, other pieces of clothing. But instead of going out and buying a pattern and just cutting it, I like to play with the fabric myself or play with, you know, do different knits to see what, you know, can I actually make a sweater without using a pattern, you know?
Wow.
So just giving myself time to be
Very
creative for no reason, almost, you know,
I
just
love
to
that.
be creative.
You're inspiring me because I used to be a lot more, I wouldn't say crafty in the same way as you. I have a sewing machine, but I haven't used it because I kind of forgot how to thread it, and I haven't gotten around to looking on YouTube how to do it. I mean, how lame is that? But it's like I have in my mind I want to make my own clothes, yet I haven't gotten over the hump of, you know, the physical part of doing that yet. But I did used to make like greeting cards, and I've done some things with wire and including wire in cards. And so like I've done some interesting things with that. And I've used my creative juices to help my daughter when she was younger, like what's going to happen, you know, like if she had a birthday party or something, hey, let's make a fairy garden, you know, I mean, that's more structured, but what can they do to, you know, what kind of art things can I have them do that's not going to ruin our house? And, you know,
Right.
And I used to do like art explorer types of things with kids when she was in kindergarten or first grade and stuff that I don't do anymore so much. And I have gotten away from really all of that type of creativity of just making for the sake of making. And it's definitely been calling to me more recently because it's a part of, I've always been called creative. I feel creative, but it's come out more in writing or ideas and not so much in physical form. And I wonder if that would help facilitate some of the other aspects of creativity.
I think yes.
Yeah.
And I would say sometimes too, I think creating just to create without like an end game or an end point. Luckily I've done that a long time, but with navigating my business and everything and being creative in the business, some of that kind of hyper-focused energy I found was translating into just the everyday creativity kind of stuff where it was like, oh, I have to finish. And it has to be something complete. And then I was like, whoa. No, this is just for fun. Like there's no attachment here. This is just to bliss out and to have a good time, just to create without needing a product at the end of it or, you know what I mean? And so I kind of had to re-navigate my creativity since in these last 2 years and remember that I'm allowed to just do it just to do it without having it to be a finished product or there be an end game. So that's been a challenge for me in the last 2 years is refinding that freedom in the creativity. But I would say when I let myself do that, everything else has space to come out. It's almost like kind of a purging and the rest, it gets space for everything else to organize. But that was hard because I went through a period of time where I was, the way I used to create just to create was like, not the same anymore, and I had to reorient to make it for fun kind of thing. You know what I mean? Yeah,
and I'm thinking that's a really important thing because creating with an outcome in mind adds so much structure and boundaries to that creative process that it can be really restrictive. I mean, creativity, in my definition at least, shouldn't have those boundaries. You know, it's like whatever, you know, and allow that free-flowing piece. And the fact that you're doing it with and giving yourself permission to not have to finish huge. Personally really resonates with me because it's like I've gotten so goal and task oriented because of the business stuff that it's like, oh, you know, I'm trying to do self-care and allowing myself to be a little bit more fluid with my schedule, but at the same point I don't have anything really that open-ended.
Yeah. I think having the open-ended things without that attachment allows the things where you need a tangible product, like in business, or you need an outcome. It allows those to flow with more ease, because you always have that outlet where it don't matter, baby. You know?
It's the balance, it's the harmony between the two. I have to say, I found this just today. I found it. I put it in a little bit of an altar kind of thing, and then I forgot that I had it there because it's not directly, it's lays flat, so I don't see it from where I sit. But I'm going to this circle following our mashup today that my neighbor is having. I have like the coolest neighbors. And she asked us to bring something that represented our family lines or intentions for this this time. And it's a female, I
have that.
Super cool. And then on the back it says, fun has a sacred dimension.
Ooh.
And that is really important for me, because I've, for some reason, always equated in the past, like mindset wise, work to being not fun. Like, you're not supposed to have fun at work. I mean, you can have fun on the, it's not supposed to be the point of work, right? Fun is like an extra thing that if you have time, you can do as long as your boss isn't watching, kind of thing. I have all these rules around that, and I'm guessing I got most of those from my parents, but maybe not. And I've really been working on exploring new ways of defining work, in that I want a spiritual business. I want something that really resonates with me, that I feel aligned with, and a big part of who I am as a person is fun. And it's the thing that also goes out the door really early when I'm focusing on things like business. I get serious, and it's like all the joy is gone, and then what's the point? So anyway, I'm telling you about this because I think that fun is such an important piece, and that creative aspect that you're talking about with the open-endedness and not needing to finish, to me, represents a big part of that allowance of fun.
Yes.
Just for the sake of fun. Because I think creativity is fun. Very cool.
I would say there was probably last year was the main point where I was having to re-navigate the creativity train without it being an end game thing. And I would say in the last 6 months, like every Sunday night, I just because I really do take time out during the weekends. It's kind of like our family time. And so every Sunday night I'm going to bed, and I just can't wait to wake up and work on my business. And I'm like, what a shift, because even in the beginning, when I decided that I wanted to start a spiritual business, it was overwhelming, and it very felt like chore based, and I have to hit all these check marks. And so I kind of realized the shift was occurring probably about 6 months ago, where I was like, I can't wait for Monday. And I was like, who says that? I just can't wait to go to sleep so that I can wake up and be creative in my job,
Yeah. Well, and do you find that, okay, let me frame that a different way. From a social standpoint, I think that it's gotten to the point where people, you're talking to somebody in small talk world, and they're like, how are you? Fine, I'm fine, you're fine, everybody's fine, what do you do? Or, what's that? But usually there's a little bit of a negative tinge to it, like, oh yeah, the daily grind. And I mean, you may not find that if you're only talking with light workers who, doing their spiritual business, but I find a pull, like an energetic pull towards that, that negative aspect about work. And it sometimes, if I'm not conscious of it, can slip into that, because it's like adapting to the environment. And I don't want to adapt to the environment. I want to say, I do. When I'm working on mashup stuff, I love it. I have so much fun. I'm so energized, especially on these Saturdays, for the whole day. And when I was working on some other business things not related to this, it's like, I'm not feeling light and happy and excited about doing this work. But this stuff I love.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell people that when they say that they had a bad day, or, that they don't like their job and stuff like that. And say, well, I love mine. Like navigating that in kind of a normative way is, have you ever encountered that? Do you find it challenging at all?
I would say my social circle here is still small and intimate, ever growing, but we've only been here, I guess we've been here 2 years. But I would say there definitely are the people where it's just the daily grind and it's the drag. But I would say the majority of, maybe it's no offense, but just a younger
Oh, no, that's
generation.
okay.
So they're all kind of sort of feeling that purpose driven, so I don't know. They're I haven't found it challenging, I guess.
That must be why I always get so excited about being in universities and colleges.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of a person who, given the opportunity, would be a perpetual student, because I am
Me
anyway,
too. Yeah.
But, I think from a generational standpoint, there is a big piece to that, in that I think there's people from my generation and, well, I mean, from all generations, who at some point awaken and start wondering, is this all there is? And there's got to be more to life. I can't believe life is intended to be boring and routine and intended for somebody else, to benefit.
Right.
And so at some point they go through that, and those are the people I usually have really awesome conversations with, and then leaving really, happy and cheerful and energized. And then there are the people who haven't gotten to that point yet, and may not, who are just like, this is all there is.
Yeah, this is all there is.
And those are the conversations where I really am challenged from a conversational standpoint, because it's like, well, I don't want to join in on that. I've been there and I don't enjoy that way of being.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm just going to abandon them if I'm, standing somewhere with a parent and they're talking about, okay, I can't be by you right now. You're messing with my vibe.
Yeah.
Although it'd be kind of funny to do that. I'm not going to do it like with parents that I see at school or, my husband. Well, actually, I would say it to him, but I don't know. I'm just noticing a lot more of that.
I wonder too if, like, I'm so close to LA, and it's kind of like a land of opportunity. People come out here to like live their dreams, California.
Yeah.
So I wonder if area matters too. The culture of an area.
Well, yeah, for sure. Culture. And I was also thinking about, it's the energy of the land. Mark Falbrecht and I have had conversations in the past about earth chakras. Minnesota, to my knowledge, has no chakra nearby. Maybe we do, but, and there is a really strong spiritual community here, but there's also, people who are, second generation immigrants, whose parents are very into the five senses and the kind of the show me stuff, and I only believe what's here, but also the hardships. They bring along that ancestral hardship energy with them, and so there's a lot around mindset of things have to be hard. And I wasn't raised in the main demographic here is Scandinavian. That I wasn't raised here, but I was close with Germanic, Swiss.
I'm
British.
Swedish, and my grandmother was raised in Duluth.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Hey, a Minnesota connection. All right, we love that here.
You betcha.
Anytime you see on the news anything that's happened in the world, if there's a Minnesota connection, we'll know about it. But, well, we are at 5 minutes left in the show today. I don't know if time passed quickly for you, but it certainly has for me. I've enjoyed this conversation immensely, Kelsey, and I thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Love to have you back.
Yeah.
And so just before we go, I want to just mention a couple of things, which I mentioned earlier, but I'll do it again. Show notes. I usually post show notes right after the show. I go back and I look at comments and respond to them, but I have an event that starts in about an hour, so I'll do what I can with the comments, but the show notes probably won't be posted until tomorrow or Monday at the latest. However, I will post the link to those here in the comments section, so if you see a notification, a couple of days or a day or so later, that's what those are if you want to check them out. Even though we didn't say specifically anybody in particular, I made notes that will turn into links for resources on concepts and things like that. So, and the good news stories. There is no mashup in 2 weeks. I do this every other week. So the 26th of October, no mashup, because I'm going to be momming that day. Showing support for volleyball. My next guest will be on November 9th, and that is with Danielle Christina Lee. And I've been wanting to have her on the show for a long time. I think I had to reschedule, or she did at some point. So I'm really excited to have her on. I hope you're able to join me. I'll post that also in the comments when I do the show notes. And I think that's it. So thanks again, Kelsey. I really, wish you a wonderful weekend. Wish everybody a magical, mystical weekend. And I look forward to seeing you all again.
Thank you again. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thanks.